إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد.
al-Khawf al-Muharram, the prohibited type of fear. Al-Khawf al-Muharram. And this is also considered by some scholars as Shirk al-Asghar, small shirk. This type of fear stops one from doing ordains or committing prohibitions. Fear that stops you from doing an ordain or refraining from doing refrain from doing a Waajib, or getting you to do a Muharram. And this is what is short of Shirk. He fears that he'll make Salah on time, for example, because people will mock him in public places. He fears to grow a beard because he fears the employer will fire him. He fears to grow a beard because he doesn't want to get scrutinized or delayed at airports. He was in a setting where people were listening to music. He didn't want to tell them that music is haram because he didn't want to be singled out, criticized, or outcast. He let his clothes go below the ankle because he didn't want to look differently, or he didn't want people to point fingers at him or mock him. He didn't speak the truth and stand up for his brothers and sisters who desperately need him because he didn't want to be labeled as a radical or extremist. This is the type of fear that's in the verse, الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسُ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. The believers were told, this was after the battle, the Muslims fought, verily the pagans have gathered against you a great army, so fear them. They gathered another army to fight you again. The hypocrites always come at you. Don't speak about prisoner rights. Don't forbid the evil. The West and their governments will tap your phone. When it was told to the Sahaba something of that similar nature, فَخْشَوْهُمْ زَادَهُمْ فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا, it increased them in faith. And they said, Allah is sufficient for us, and we put our trust in Allah. وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. The following verse tells, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانِ. Those who scare you, they're the devils. It's only the shaitan that suggests to you to fear his awliya, the awliya of shaitan. Some considered this category of fear as haram because it gets you to leave some ordains, or it gets you to do some prohibitions for fear of other than Allah. Some ulama considered it small shirk because of the hadith in Musnad Ahmad, and it really possibly depends on the heart feeling in this. It's between haram and small shirk. Because of the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah tells a servant on the day of judgment, why didn't you deter from the evil? And he says, oh Allah, I feared people. Allah says, replies to him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you should have feared me. إن الله يقول للعبد يوم القيامة ما منعك إذا رأيت المنكر لا تغيره فيقول رب خشيت الناس فيقول الله إياي كنت أحق أن تخشى. He feared the people. And he said, and he admitted to Allah, I feared people. Allah said, you should have feared me. Now under this second category, the fear that's prohibited, we have other additional categories. And this is a matter that must be noted. And it's the conditions where one could possibly say the words of kufr, the exemptions where one could say the possible words of kufr, wal-'iyadhu billah, or do a haram, or to not do a ordain. The first one is if the injury or harm or threat that you're going to get is unbearable. If it's ikrah, this is called ikrah. This is A. Someone whipped or lashed to the point that they can no longer take it. There's details on the level of what constitutes ikrah. But as Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, it depends on the one being tortured. Why? Because some people can endure extreme torture. Some cannot. Some are softies. Some ulama said prison is ikrah. Others said no. Each circumstance is different. And it must be studied and analyzed independently. It depends really on the individual. Al-Khazin said it must be extreme pain and torture that one cannot bear, or even death. Sometimes, for some people, one day in prison, and it could be an older, sick man who's very sick, that could constitute ikrah, unbearable harm. Whereas for a younger, healthy, strong man, a lifetime in prison wouldn't constitute ikrah. There's other evidence and indicators that point what ikrah is and what's not, and really it's got to be studied on an individual basis. One must keep in mind that the word of Tawheed and Allah's rights of haram and halal are mighty matters. And they're mighty matters that a true believer would hate to compromise unless it's the biggest of unbearable torture. And one with the strongest of iman would rather lose his life than compromise on that. There's no doubt being firm, even if it costs one his death, is better. But we're saying, what if someone decides to take the exemption? For example, when September 11 happened, some supposed shuyukh or dua or whatever they want to call themselves, they ran around issuing fatwas that a woman can just wear a hat for hijab. Some type of hat that they said is good, and that's hijab. Why? They said it's ikrah. And that's foolishness. That's jokes. After September 11, you can possibly count on your fingers how many of our beloved sisters were harmed. Yet they began to make it an issue as if it was an issue of ikrah, compromising something that's wajib. Those are the human devils. إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ, in that type of thinking. إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاهُ. You need to keep ikrah in mind that ikrah is one threatening must be able to carry out what he claims. And you must not be able to defend yourself. And if you're ordered to say kufr or haram or leave a wajib and it's unbearable harm, then you can take it. If you can't defend yourself and he can carry out what he's saying he's going to do to you. And number two, you have to believe that he will actually carry out that threat. It's not a possibility. Meaning if I don't do that haram or say that word of kufr, wal'iyadu billah, he would definitely kill me. He would definitely, the whip is in his hand and he's going to whip me so much that I will not even be able to bear it. Mere threats don't constitute ikrah. As Ibn al-Jawzi narrated, that Imam Ahmad said in Zad al-Masir. That's the second one. Third is, what you're threatened with has to be imminent. It's going to happen now. If it's a matter of the future, wait. So not only are you sure it's going to happen, but it's going to happen right now, or very imminent, right in a few moments. So if they say, for example, shave your beard, or say words of kufr, wal-iyadu billah, and the threat will not be carried out. You wait until they're about to carry out that threat. And the final point is, if they give you a choice, like that of Shu'aib alayhi salam, قال الملأ الذين استكبروا من قومه لنخرجنك يا شعيب والذين آمنوا معك من قريتنا أو لتعودن في ملتنا قال أولو كنا كارهين قد افترينا على الله كذبا إن عدنا في ملتكم بعد أن نجانا الله منها وما يكون لنا أن نعود فيها إلا أن يشاء الله ربنا. They told Shu'aib, either leave the country or come back to our religion. He said, no way will I go back. They gave him a choice. You either leave the USA or do this haram. You pack up and leave. If they give you the choice. You don't say my property, my friends, my family. There's no ikrah if you have a choice. Just so you know, and I want you to know the level of harm one must be inflicted with or threatened with, that he has to know will immediately happen before he says kufr or does a haram or leaves an obligation. To know the level, you know, when the whipping and lashing that they used to have back in the days is much worse than what's done today. In fact, the one lashing, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah said to him, لو ضربت تلك الصياط فيلا لهدته من جوفه. If the whips I hit you with, I went and hit an elephant with, they dropped that elephant dead. Imam Ahmad objected to the scholars who claimed ikrah during his time. When they claimed torture, he said, that's not torture. When they were giving him the choice between saying the Quran is the creation of Allah when it's in reality the word of Allah. When Imam Ahmad objected to that, some of them gave in. Some of the ulama. And when he questioned them, they said, إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. He said, Ammar, when that verse was revealed, he was being lashed. You guys were merely threatened. Meaning he didn't think it was sufficient to be threatened. You have to surely know that it's going to be carried out, and carried out immediately on the spot. He didn't exempt them when they began to say the issue of Ammar radiallahu anhu and how he said what he said. Imam Ahmad, his best friend, one of his best friends, Yahya ibn Ma'in. Yahya ibn Ma'in gave in and said some words to avoid torture. Imam Ahmad objected to his friend. And he said about Yahya ibn Ma'in, he said one time, he tells me he was under ikrah and he wasn't even lashed. So Imam Ahmad objected to his friend Yahya because he said it without being lashed or being threatened on the spot. So the scrutiny is very high to become ikrah and say, and use the exemption that we have. But keep in mind, and here's another matter where other people go wrong. You can't be a mu'tadi in ikrah. What does that mean? With Allah's rights, Allah is merciful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very merciful. He forgives. He gives you exemption. It's different with the rights of Muslims. So if it means under ikrah, under torture or being killed, one, his heart is full of iman, he can say the words of kufr to avoid that punishment, the unbearable punishment. It's from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he makes it an exemption to his rights, but not to the rights of Muslims. As in Ammar's case, he told Quraysh some words under duress and torture. That's Allah's rights. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives. They lash you so bad, or they cut your flesh with knives, as we've seen on clips from Syria, and you say Bashar is Allah wal-'iyadhu billah, or whatever they want you to say, you can't take it no more, you say it. It's better to be patient and not say it, but if you do, you're exempted. But let's say they have someone in prison and they tell them to do fornication with another Muslim. I used to remember decades ago when I used to listen to Kishk rahimahullah and his old tapes and talk about prison conditions in Egypt back in the 60s. He said there were circumstances when they would tell a man to have a relationship, a prisoner with another prisoner. Even if they shred you piece by piece, you cannot do that. Why? وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. No bearer of burdens shall bear the burden of another. And also, لا ضرر ولا ضرار. In Sunan ibn Majah, لا ضرر ولا ضرار. There should be no harming and no reciprocating in harm. No harming and no reciprocating harm. What's common today, someone goes to prison, for example, all over the world. And they really want someone for another reason. Someone else, for example. Maybe someone who's speaking the truth on matters. The other person, they got no evidence that he did anything wrong in their supposed legal system. So they go to people around him, to a surrounding Muslim community. They threaten them with prison. Or they harass them, keep visiting them. Or sometimes they take them to prison for some petty ticket or bogus claims. Then they threaten them with big sentences. Or sometimes they just merely imply threats. Then at the end they say, well, if you testify against Sheikh so-and-so or another individual, we'll reduce your sentence from 20 years to 5 years. Or we'll let you go home right now. Or we'll drop the immigration charges on you. And we'll let you stay in this country, we'll give you citizenship. I can name many worldwide who are like this. And many who are oppressed worldwide who are in prison because of this. They testify falsely to save themselves and put other Muslims in prison. You can't do that Islamically, no matter how bad the torture is. Once it comes to harming a Muslim, the limits of ikrah stop. With Allah's rights, He gives you leverage. He forgives you. He doesn't hold you accountable. With Muslims, even if you're tortured or killed, to rape a Muslim, to testify falsely, to say something, they give you the choice between that, the torture, and killing a Muslim. Go home, but you kill a Muslim, or you harm a Muslim, you can't. Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah said, أجمع العلماء على أن من أكره على قتل غيره أنه لا يجوز له الإقدام على قتله. Qurtubi rahimahullah said, it's isma', one who is compelled to kill another cannot kill him. There's no compelling in this, there's no ikrah in this. ولا انتهاك حرمته بجلد أو غيره. Not only killing, he said there's ijma', you cannot be compelled, there's no ikrah, to transgress on the honor by lashing or anything similar of that nature. Meaning they say, we whip you or you whip the Muslim. No, whip me. There's no choice in that. There's no choice. Kill him or you kill. No, kill me. There's no choice. وَيَصْبِرُ عَلَى الْبَلَاءِ الَّذِي نَزَلَ بِهِ. Al-Qurtubi said he must be patient in this matter. There's no choice in that. وَلَا يَحِلُّ لَهُ أَنْ يَفْدِيَ نَفْسَهُ بِغَيْرِهِ. Ijma'. He cannot ransom himself for another. ويسأل الله العافية في الدنيا والآخرة. نسأل الله العافية. نسأل الله العافية. At the end of his quote he said, and you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you safe from those type of trials. It's ijma'. And you don't have a choice in those matters. When it comes to the rights of a Muslim, it's not a choice of ikrah. Allah's rights, tolerable. Allah exempts you. He won't hold you accountable if it's ikrah. With Muslim rights, there's no choice. There's no ikrah. Now, the second level after that is mashaqqa. After ikrah, there's mashaqqa, which is difficult hardship that one can bear. It's a hardship, but one can bear. Like a little bit of lashing, a prison term he can handle. There's a difference between the first one I mentioned, ikrah and mashaqqa. There's a difference between ikrah and mashaqqa. Ikrah is unbearable. The first one I mentioned is unbearable. Mashaqqa is bearable. It's a hardship, but it's bearable. One cannot fear this fear to leave and ordain or do a haram. The third one is, the third level of harm or threat of harm is like curses or mocking. In this one also you cannot do a haram or it doesn't give you the exemption or leave out and ordain. And the fourth one is al-jubun, al-wahan wal-jubun. It's really being cowardly. It has no reality and you can't leave and ordain or do a haram for this one, because really this one's a figment of imagination, and really this is the one that really goes on most of the time in our communities. Let me give you an overall of what we took so far so you won't get lost, because this branched out a little bit. The first thing we took so far is, last week we took an example of ibadah, which is dua. Today it's khawf. So we took khawf. We took the definition of khawf. That's the first thing we took. Then we took the two avenues of how to show a ibadah becomes shirk. Then we took specific proof that the author used for ibadah. فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Then we took the types of fear, because not all fears are shirk. The first one was natural fear. We said that's permissible. Then we took the prohibited type of fear, and we took under it 4 categories of compulsion. That's what we took so far. In summary, this is prohibited because it makes you leave an obligation or do a sin. The second type of fear. It's not secret fear, but it's an apparent one. There's people there who are going to make fun of someone. They're going to torture him. It's not secret or hidden fear. Someone may curse him. So this is apparent fear, and you cannot use that to leave an ordain or do a haram.